Okay, everybody, before we get going today on our weirdest story of the day, we still got one more to go. This one's a little more normal, but the one that follows up is going to be pretty strange. But from Reason, it says Trump abused his power, but a hasty impeachment will undermine that point, according to Reason. The gaps in the record invite the public to dismiss impeachment as a purely partisan exercise, and it absolutely is. It's pure butthurt, like I said from the start. But despite all the speculation about statutes that Donald Trump might have violated in his dealings with Ukraine, the two articles of impeachment unveiled yesterday are conspicuously lacking in specific criminal allegations. Instead, the articles allege that the president abused his powers by pressuring Ukraine to conduct investigations that would benefit him politically, and that he improperly obstructed a congressional investigation of that abuse. To my mind, there is compelling evidence that he did both of those things. Unfortunately, the record is not as complete as it could have been, as George Washington University law professor Jonathan Turley pointed out during his congressional testimony last week. The gaps in the case against Trump are big enough that his supporters can and will dismiss impeachment as purely partisan exercise without losing any sleep above the broader issues at stake. There were sound legal reasons for not accusing Trump of statutory defined crimes. The most recently floated possibility, bribery, would require showing that Trump solicited anything of value, in this case, in investigation of his political rival, in return for being influenced in the performance of any official act. In this case, the release of congressionally approved military aid to Ukraine that Trump had blocked, even assuming the quid pro quo, that circumstantial evidence and testimony by current and former administration officials strongly suggest. It is not clear that the major investigation into the Bidens Trump wanted would qualify as anything of value. Turley argues that the release of unspecified findings from an official investigation at some unspecified date are not a thing of value under any reasonable definition of the statute. Need I remind you that the whole thing about Ukraine was based on someone's misinterpretation of the call, which was revealed at the hearing? They're shallow. This attempt is shallow. But there is a similar problem with defining the favor that Trump sought from Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky. As an illegal foreign campaign contribution, the relevant statute makes it a crime to solicit a contribution or a donation of money or other thing of value in connection with a federal, state, or local election. From a foreign national, the Federal Election Commission defines things of value. Broadly, anything of value includes all in-kind contributions defined as the provision of any goods or services without charge or at a charge that is less than the usual and normal charge for such goods or services. But as Turley notes, Justice Department prosecutors who reviewed Trump's July 25th phone call with Zelensky concluded that the call did not involve a request for a thing of value under the federal law. Furthermore, a felony charge under the statute requires that the contribution be worth at least $25,000, which would make it necessary to attach a dollar value to the speculative benefit that Trump's re-election campaign would receive from a Ukrainian investigation of the implausible allegation that Biden uses influence as vice president to protect his son. Finally, if dirt on Biden qualifies as a campaign contribution, so would compromising information about any candidate, which raises serious First Amendment issues. Turley also considers the possibility of framing Trump's actions as extortion, which they certainly resemble as the term is commonly understood. Extortion cases involve tangible property, not possible political advantage. He says in his summary of the case law, the Biden investigation may have tangible political benefits, but it is not a form of property. Right. So it can't really be put under that. It's obvious that the Democrats are grasping at straws now. They're trying desperately. They're even trying to stretch the definition of legal actions in order to encompass his behavior. But it can't. Not unless you change the entire fucking legal dictionary, which I wouldn't put it past them to try, by the way. But Turley, an expert on impeachment, emphasized that high crimes and misdemeanors are not limited to statutory violations. It is possible to establish a case for impeachment based on a non-criminal allegation of abuse of power, he says. His call was anything but perfect, and his reference to the Bidens was highly inappropriate. The use of military aid for a quid pro quo to investigate one's political opponent, if proven, can be an impeachable offense. But Turley faults the House for rushing the process to meet a politically convenient goal of impeaching Trump by the end of this year. The House Intelligence Committee declared that it would not subpoena a host of witnesses who have direct knowledge of any quid pro quo, Turley says. Instead, it would proceed on a record composed of a relatively small number of witnesses with largely second-hand knowledge. One can quibble with the characterization since the record includes testimony about direct interactions between Trump and Gordon, Sondland, the U.S. ambassador to the European Union, as well as between Sondland and Trump's personal lawyers. Rudy Giuliani, whom Sondland understood was acting as the president's agent, but it's true that the case for a quid pro quo is based mainly on inferences and indirect evidence. The decision not to subpoena directly relevant witnesses such as Giuliani, former National Security Advisor John Bolton, and acting White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney was based on a desire to avoid time-consuming court battles over whether they would be compelled to testify. But as Turley notes, rulings involving Trump's financial records and the testimony of former White House counsel Don McGahn suggest that Congress would have won those battles. Turley argues that litigation over documents sought by Congress and the testimony of Giuliani could have been expedited, as similar litigation was in the Watergate investigation. Once Trump was confronted by court orders requiring his cooperation with the Ukraine investigation, Turley suggests Congress would have been on firmer ground in accusing him of obstruction. One can oppose President Trump's policies or actions but still conclude that the current legal case for impeachment is not just woefully inadequate, but in some respects dangerous as the basis for the impeachment of an American president. Turley says this is an exceptionally narrow impeachment resting on the thinnest possible evidentiary record. Someone who thinks that it might be possible to impeach him is literally telling you this. Will you listen? Probably not. But I have little doubt, based on the existing record, that Trump did in fact abuse his powers to serve his personal interests. But Turley is right. The Congress could and should have done more to rebut Trump's defenses. That his desire for an investigation of the Bidens was based on a legitimate concern about official corruption in Ukraine. And that, in any case, it was not connected to the delivery of military aid. While that first claim strikes me as widely implausible, there is enough doubt that the quid pro quo to satisfy Republicans, even if they privately agree that Trump's request was inappropriate. The question for the House remains whether it is seeking it simply to secure an impeachment or actually trying to build a case for removal. Turley says if it is the latter, then it is not the schedule or the process needed to build a viable case. The House should not assume that the Republican control of the Senate makes any serious effort at impeachment, impractical or naive. All four impeachment inquiries have occurred during rabid political periods. However, politicians can on occasion rise to the moment and choose principle over politics. As the record stands, it is not likely to persuade anyone who is otherwise inclined to support Trump, meaning we will get a party line impeachment in the House, followed by a party line acquittal in the Senate. What should have been a debate about the limits of tolerable presidential behavior has instead become another bitter partisan squabble, signifying nothing but reflexive allegiance to arbitrary defined tribes. While impeachment is inherently a political process, it cannot properly function as a check on presidential power when the public believes it is driven by nothing but politics. And it is driven by nothing but pure politics. That's all it's ever been. They're just butthurt because they lost. Period. And this has been, no president in the history of this country has ever been treated this way. They've never gone after anyone harder. And the truth is, because he is a political outsider. He is not a career politician. He has not been a part of the system his entire life like all these other people have. He is an outsider. A rich outsider, but an outsider nonetheless. He came into the system from outside of it. He was not a part of it. Unlike what the democratic socialists in our society these days will claim, which that claim is bullshit, of course. Oh, if you're rich, you're part of the system. You do know what the system means, right? Politics. You're rich, so you're automatically part of politics? You win the lottery and now you're part of the system? Has the socialist rhetoric really rotted your brain that much? I mean, come on. He is an outsider. And that is why they're part of the reason why they're trying to remove him. Because get this, there's even Republicans trying to get him impeached. Because he's not a career politician. He's not part of the system. He's not an establishment person. He's an outsider, and he's undermined the establishment in a lot of different ways. And here's how I see it going down. Due to what has happened, Trump has survived everything, and he's become the stronger for it. The more they throw at him, the tougher he'll get. He'll bounce everything off, and he will become inspired. He will become an inspired president. And he'll try to do better in order to make himself even more invulnerable to anything they could throw at him. Meanwhile, Hillary Clinton has an unprecedented opportunity to reforge and rebuild her base and start over from scratch. Most likely, she will not learn from her mistakes, but she has an opportunity to do so. She will reforge, create a new base, and become like an unleashed animal. And she'll finally present a credible threat to Donald Trump. All in all, this election, there will be more votes for both candidates, I think. There will be more votes for Trump. There will be fewer milquetoast people on that issue. And there will be more supporters for Hillary as well. The rematch, so to speak, will be much greater than the original match, so to speak. This is one time where the rematch actually is better than the original fight, so to speak. Anyway, peace. Yeah, there you go. Peace.